This will be recreated during the daytime also if the pinch points are removed and no traffic calming is put in their place. The pinch points have never worked that well. Cars speed up to get through them in time, with many near misses, and they're terrible for pedestrians. However, they do serve the purpose of us being able to access out of our road and onto Gunfield Road at peak time. By turning right, we have to wait for cars approaching the pinpoints, halting traffic coming in the other direction, and then we quickly have to pull out behind the cars that are going through the pinch points. Without any traffic calming to slow the traffic, we will find it virtually impossible to turn right at peak times unless a pedestrian uses the new crossing. This replicates the scenario that the new access road from the new estate will find themselves in. However, they will be trying to quickly pull out to turn right whilst also negotiating pulling straight out onto a zebra crossing. Point 4 and 4.5 of the original traffic assessment also stated that cars would give way to traffic turning right at the pinch points to go into the new access road. But in reality, cars never give way at the pinch points for us to turn right into the existing access lane, our lane. We have to turn right just as quick as we can to get in. Cars attempting to turn right from Broadwood Lane into Gunfield Road during peak time would also find it very difficult to do so with no traffic calming at all. The £45,000 contribution mentioned to improve pedestrian safety and infrastructure in Gunfield needs to be used for improving road safety and not to end up with a much more dangerous situation than we already have because cars will be going an awful lot faster than they currently do. Island Roads have recommended refusal for this application for the same reasons as the two recent Arthur Moody Road applications have been refused. One application was 113 houses exiting out onto Gunfield Road in almost the identical place as this application, almost an identical size of houses application, only 4 in it. This refusal recommendation is due to the Waverley Roundabout, Priory Road, Carisbrooke High Street increased traffic queues. At present, it's very dangerous when a bus or lorry comes down narrow parts of Priory Road as you have to mount the pavement to allow a car and bus through. If traffic was queuing even further back down Priory Road as a result of this application, a whole queue of traffic would have to mount the pavement each time a lorry or bus passes. Despite Island Road saying there's no solution to this, reopening Taylor Road is a solution along by Carisbrooke College. Therefore, it's surely advisable to defer any further large housing planning application approvals in Gunfield until at least after Taylor Road has been resurfaced by the developer of the land nearby, whoever purchases it, and reopened, providing an alternative route for traffic along an already existing estate road. As Island Roads point out with traffic modelling, Gunfield residents now favour using Carisbrooke rather than Forest Road since the introduction of traffic lights at St Mary's. As reported by Island Roads, this has already naturally increased traffic queues at the Waverley, which get a lot worse during the summer months, this summer in particular. Near-miss accidents at the Waverley roundabout are also frequent. Before any new houses are built in Gunfield, an off-main road cycle track is essential to give an alternative route and means of travel both to Newport and Cowes, and to connect Gunfield and Carisbrooke to the rest of the cycle tracks across the island. The number 7 bus route was reduced down from a half-hourly to an hourly service over 7 years ago. So that option is not so usable as an alternative method of transport to ease traffic on this particular stretch of road, especially at night when the number 38 bus stops. This too would need to be reconsidered before any additional large-scale houses are built. The new scheme would also have to have a pedestrian public footpath extension to the schools from the new estate, which is not dependent on using the new access road. This is because even with a zebra or pedestrian crossing, kids from our part of Gunfield Road have to cross over the road and then back again, as there is no continuous pavement to the Home Bargains side of the road. Kids from our end of Gunfield do not use this new central zebra crossing as it's in the wrong place, too far up the road for them, and therefore all the kids cross by Home Bargains right on the junction where there's no crossing, which is very dangerous already for both pedestrians and road users, without the addition of any 117 new houses and children doing exactly the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. David Long, you have 6 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to kind of summarise where we're up to date, I mean, the site's been kind of earmarked by the council as part of every growth strategy, including land to the further south and also on the council's land itself since 2013. It's been in every suggested allocation, and even the Newport and Carisbrooke Community Council have even kind of changed their previous objection to one that supports the growth of this specific site. So there has been a definite seed corn change, both from a political dimension and a consistent dimension from the Isle of Wight Council. So when we talk about sustainability of the site, in planning policy, local planning policy, I'd say, this completely symbolises what a sustainable site's all about. We're directly adjacent, near to, within walking and cycle distance of the major consortium of schools within the area. We're next to some of the largest retail parks and employment zones in Newport and the island. We're next to Victoria Rec Ground. Hey, by the end of today, we can go up there and go to the pub and have a couple of pints. Everything is there to be sustainable, both in Gunfield itself and also in close proximity to Newport, which is the council's major arc of being a regeneration area. So it is in the right location. It's got all the right credentials to be sustainable. And so when we're looking at that kind of presumption in favour, we all know Section 11D of the MPPF, you might feel that's thrust upon you to say, you've got to approve it, but it is there for a logical reason to say we want growth in the right locations. So when we start to look at kind of breaking it down in detail, just picking out on Councillor Critchton's comments about the last application about biodiversity net gain as one of the detailed issues. We're not here with a prescribed solution. We're just saying, in principle, if we can get access into the site as per the detail, we can deliver the net gain because the solution is going to be sorted by reserve matters. We're not prescribing any form of layout. We've gone to the maximum capacity of density, but actually, probably with net gain, etc., we're going to be a lower density, so that's going to reduce traffic. As a kind of a recent representation request of the Isle of Wight Council, it's something that we actually accept, and it's documented in the report about the sustainable transport contribution of £45,000. And your public rights of way officer, as actually it's not a contribution. That contribution, that 45,000, is actually enough money to deliver the objective to get to the Gunfield West Wight cycle track. So it's not a contribution that other people are paying into. It's something that will actually be delivered by that sole £45,000. To us, that's a really good thing. We encourage it. We're not shying away from it. It's going to make people transverse west quite easily, and also down into the centre of Newport really easily. And actually, within 40 minutes, if you're ambitious, you could walk to Newport. If within 10 minutes, you can cycle to Newport. It's a great site. When we look at not dismissing the objections at all, because the objections have got substance to them, but actually if you're looking at the volume of them, there's 14. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, because everyone's got right to object for sure, but actually it hasn't been that much of a controversial application, which obviously you can weigh up. I'm not dismissing the objectors' concerns that they've raised, but actually on highways, I will thrust down Section 11D just a second. So, and Mr. Chick raised it in the last application. We are within the context of the MPPF, and what that tells us, rightly or wrongly, but it does tell us, it says the presumption in favour is triggered, but you should, if there are significant and adverse impacts, that outweigh the benefits. And it's for you guys to weigh up the significant benefits against some of the issues arising. I mean, just on highway bits alone, we know that the Gunfield Forest Road traffic signals are fine. We know that the Gunfield Broadwood Lane junction is fine. We know that the Gunfield Road Taylor Road junction is fine in traffic terms. So the debate is actually about the Waverley Junction. And so that's where we've come to a pragmatic solution with the council to look at the alternative means of transport. And just directed to section 6.9 of the officer's report, and it just cites paragraph 105 of the MPPF. It says significant development should be focused on locations, i.e. sustainable locations, which I've just described, which are or can be made sustainable through limiting the needs of travel and by offering genuine choice of transport modes. So not only is the site in a great location to be sustainable, it's fairly benign, and what we're trying to do is is infill the urban context rather than expand from the rural context, if that makes sense. What we're doing is offering the genuine choice of travel. So once we're balancing up all of these issues against Section 11D, getting corrected ecology and net biodiversity gain, we've sorted out ecology, etc., just come to employee members. It's a good site, it's in the right location and can be developed successfully. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. If we go to any questions from members, Dr. Price.
First of all, I'd like to thank the member of the public that spoke very well tonight. You did a fantastic job, Joe, because actually you came with some alternatives to just saying, let's just turn something down. And I think that's, if you don't mind me saying that, Chairman. I think there were quite a few of us nodding along to things you were saying. When it comes to Newport, you've got a tough audience to convince, I'm afraid. We want what's best for the area we represent, and there's three of us here tonight that represent Newport, plus Shirley as well, here for IWALT, and we will want what is safest and best for our town. I don't think there's any doubt at all that this site is a sensible site for development. Question? There is a question. And the reason I want to say that first is because the site falls down to the access, 100%. The access, and I'll go straight to the question now, is we're taking away essentially a reservation for pedestrians to stand on where they would cross. We're taking that away. There's an argument I know that says that actually sometimes perhaps speeds traffic up. I use Gunfield Road every single day, so I know if it does or doesn't. And I'd say in some respects it might do. What we can't do is take that away and not replace it with something significant. Can we straight away look at a fully controlled pedestrian crossing with a raised platform? That would be a significant improvement to safety there, and I think it would slow down traffic outside the junction that this lady's talking about, Broadwood Lane, and the new entrance into this site. My question is, can we cut to the chase and ask for that straight away?
We go straight to, that would be to Island Roads, ready to answer that, and then we'll go to Sarah first.
Thank you, Chairman. That's a tricky one to answer, if I'm honest, Councillor Price. I suppose if members considered it to be necessary to make the development acceptable, then the direct answer is yes, you could. One thing I would be concerned about in terms of adding it as a condition or a requirement of the consent at this point is that I personally have no clue the cost of such a provision. It is an off-site requirement. It's not something that's in control of the applicant. It would be an on-highway works. So I would be concerned that without having an understanding of the required cost of such works, it may be difficult for me to establish this evening to advise members whether that would be commensurate with the impact associated with the development and therefore whether it would meet the tests of reasonableness. So it would potentially be a matter that members may wish to defer in order to establish that as the point of clarification. I would say if that was the approach members wish to take, I would want to establish that was the sole issue that stood. And so if we were to bring it back to you with that as a kind of financial position and an understanding of the cost in relation to development, members would have all the facts and information in front of them to make that judgment, but solely on that issue. What I wouldn't want to do effectively is bring it back to another meeting and a secondary issue be raised that we hadn't then kind of dealt with during this meeting. But it would be challenging for me to say at this point whether it complied with the tests and whether it be reasonable in highway terms, which may actually be where we'll bring Mr. White in.
Mr. White, do you want to come in on that?
Thank you, Chair. I've got to be honest. I don't know if it's permissible to put a controlled crossing on a raised plateau, because it would be a raised plateau in isolation on that part of the highway network. I can't sit here tonight and say, yes, that would be technically permissible on the highway network. I would have to go away myself and reevaluate that and seek advice from others as well. There's no point me sitting here and saying, yes, it could be done only for it to fall foul of technical standards.
Yes, Councillor Price, I've then got Councillor, well, I've got Councillor Smart and then I've got Councillor Brodie.
Sorry, I know we should be in questions, but just coming back on that, I mean, there's two things. One is we're looking at a outline scheme, so to factor the cost of that into that scheme, it wouldn't be unreasonable to ask for that at this stage. We're not looking at a detailed scheme that's been fully costed. It's an outline scheme. A developer can look at building that cost into their scheme. There's no doubt at all. And also, what Mr. White's just said, you know, there are deviations from standard that can be looked at. The council can use that where it's appropriate and where it's something that's going to deliver a significant improvement. But then there may be also other elements that would make that. I'm probably looking to Alan to nod or shake his head, whether there are other elements that could be put into a scheme to make it acceptable at that point of the road. Would it be bollards? Would it be road markings? Would it be anti-skid surfacing? There's probably something, isn't there?
Thanks, Chairman. I think in answer to that, Councillor Price, I think the issue effectively is that possibly, but we don't know. And we don't want to veer into a position where we're advising members on something we don't know the answer to. So if members are requesting that it be a control crossing with a raised plateau, actually it would potentially be more sensible to provide members with, if it can be a raised plateau, yes. If it can't be a raised plateau, why? In highway safety terms, what the reason is for that, what the alternatives available may be, so that all members can make a judgment as to whether that is appropriate and reasonable in relation to the development. And so that would be my concern, is that we don't know the answer.
Mr. White, but then I'm going to make a...
Thank you, Chair. What I would say is, as part of the evaluation process, Island Roads, the development control team, have been in consultation with the applicant, and we raised the need for a control crossing. A zebra crossing is a control crossing, but I recognise that what you're suggesting is a signal control crossing there. A zebra crossing would come with anti-skid surfacing. It would, yes, result in a removal of the build out, but the need for the actual crossing there was seen to be to protect pedestrians and to provide a continuous link for a potential desire line there. So what is on the plan in front of you now, what was deemed to be acceptable in terms of pedestrian connectivity? And I also hear the comments that have been raised in terms of speeds, and from my own experience on that part of the network on the numerous occasions that I've been there to assess this application and various other applications. My professional opinion is that the provision of the zebra crossing would significantly enhance pedestrian connectivity and safety in that area, because at present, I feel that motorists, when they're driving through that area, yes, there is the priority flow system, but they're concentrating more on getting around the build out than any pedestrians that may be crossing at that point. On the numerous occasions that I've stood there in full PPE, waiting to cross the road, nobody, in my experience, ever considers giving way to a pedestrian or giving any heed to them. So I feel that the zebra crossing does offer a significant element of improvement there for pedestrians.
I've got Councillor Smart and Councillor Brodie.
I thought my voice would carry anyway. It's probably an unfair question now, because Alan has come forward with a lot of comments. It was just, I also would like to congratulate Joe. And there were a number of other things that Joe actually mentioned, and I wondered whether Alan had any comments on any of those. I know, because I go around there quite a lot, Waverley Corner, Waverley Roundabout, and I don't see what we can do, but I don't really see that as a reason now to actually turn down this application. The original thought was we didn't like the parish council didn't like it one little bit as far as the access was concerned. This has been overcome, and therefore that was the reason, or one of the reasons, for in fact changing the views that the Newport and Carisbrooke Community Council felt we should do it. I'm very disappointed that the local member, I don't know whether he's apologised, but the local member, so much for, you know, comments, yes, I will be there, but we won't go there.
Your question was I think the particular points about that were raised
That Joe raised.
from our objector and other ideas. Can you answer those? Or sorry, Sarah.
I said I thought it was an unfair question.
Thank you, Chairman. It may be that Alan wants to cover the points off, but I know that I did take notes, so that might help kind of reiterate what was said previously. I think in terms of some of the comments raised related to the challenges of queuing traffic in Priory Road and the issues of buses and passing vehicles, and that development which would add traffic in that area would potentially exacerbate that issue. I suppose what I would highlight is that, as set out within both the Island Roads comments and therefore represented in the report, is that the in terms of the capacity on that roundabout, the issue relates solely to the lane that goes down Carisbrooke High Street. So the proposed development isn't considered to impact on Priory Road in terms of that arm of the roundabout. The queuing would be onto Carisbrooke Road, which officers have said, yes, absolutely, there's the potential to increase queuing onto Carisbrooke Road. There is no way to improve the Waverley roundabout, and we consider, on balance, when you consider the benefits of the site, that impact on Carisbrooke High Street of additional cars in a queue for an hour a day, and I think that is what is important. We're talking about peak hour. Anecdotally, I drive home that way and along Carisbrooke High Street and up past the Waverley roundabout, and I drove home at that peak hour the other day, and I don't know whether it's because everyone's now working at home, but there were no cars. It was completely clear. And I think that, I suppose, we are in slightly different times following the kind of working at home strategy, and I appreciate that that's going to be temporary for some people, but it's getting those changes of attitude in place. We're not talking about a permanent issue on that junction. We're talking about peak hour capacity issue in Carisbrooke High Street. So the concern raised by Island Roads in the comment they've raised isn't actually in relation to the kind of arm off Priory Road that isn't considered to be at capacity and wouldn't be as a result of the proposed development. So just for clarity, I hope that answers the question.
That's fine. I've got Councillor Brodie had his hand up previously, then Councillor Quirk and Councillor Jarman, Councillor Oliver. Oh, we're still with questions, please.
Right, thank you, Chair. Can I just make a correction here? We were provided with a speakers list for this meeting, which has the local member as Councillor Joe Lever. He's not actually the Isle of Wight councillor for this area. This is in Newport West, and the Isle of Wight councillor is Ray Redrup, who didn't appear today. Joe Lever is actually a community councillor for Newport West, but he wouldn't necessarily have come to make representations.
I accept that.
Okay, it's, just to make that point. Can I? The question I have for Sarah Wilkinson is, unsurprisingly, is you know, we talked about previous applications in this area recently. We rejected an application down Broadwood Lane, Arthur Moody Drive, not so long ago because of concerns about the highway infrastructure in this area, not only the Waverley roundabout, but just the amount of traffic that is likely to start appearing in the Gunfield area in the years to come, because it's an area that anybody would realise is going to be probably expanded housing-wise quite significantly over future years. That would be my prediction. I'm not saying it's going to happen definitely, but that would be my prediction. And one of the things I've asked for, and I'm going to ask the question now, would it be reasonable, Sarah, would it be reasonable for us to secure highway improvement contributions from every developer who puts an application in this area in the future? Do you have a formula, perhaps, for that sort of contribution? I think, from my point of view, it's imperative that we start to address issues, perhaps like opening, as the objector referred to, Taylor Road, which would provide an alternative way into Gunfield to and from Newport via Wellington Road. Is it reasonable? That's a straightforward question. Thank you very much.
Through the chairman, thank you, Chairman. Possibly. It's planning, so it's a little black and white, and I'm never going to provide you with a straight answer on that one, I'm afraid. Possibly. I think we would need, once again, similar to the question in regards to the controlled crossing, we would need to establish, firstly, whether, so certainly the suggestion opening up Taylor Road would mitigate the impacts. Would it do what we wish it to do? And if it would, then look at the costs associated with that work, which we do have, and then establish how that could be split between the developments within the vicinity of this site. There would be an element of risk associated with that, because obviously we have one development that has, or effectively one development that's recently been refused. That wasn't a requirement of that. That is likely to go to appeal, so that won't be on the table for that development. So in utilising that calculation, the officers would need to consider the level of risk associated with splitting the contribution between all developments, with the risk that one of them may not contribute to that, and the reasonableness of that contribution in relation to the nature of the development and whether it is appropriately commensurate to the harm, effectively. And so it is likely that if that was something sought by members, we would need to take that away and consider whether that would comply with the tests and whether it would be reasonable and commensurate.
Yeah, am I right in thinking that if we want to put sort of section 106 type commitments in, we have to put them in at this stage? And a second question, follow up on that.
Through the chairman, yes, that's correct. It would have to be associated with the outline.
And the second one is, if the committee was minded to approve this, could it put the consideration of the most appropriate form of crossing on the road into reserve matters?
Through the chairman, I think from my perspective, probably not. I have a legal advisor hovering, so I may need clarification. But from my response would be that it wouldn't, that access is being considered. So although it's outlined, access is the element for consideration. And if you require the crossing to make the access acceptable, you would need to consider it at outline stage. But if you can bear with me 2 moments, I will clarify. Sorry, Chairman, I've got nothing further to add in relation to that question. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't sure whether Councillor Crook, did you have another question, or was that that was the second part? Okay. I do like the idea of contributions to highways improvements, and I do like the idea of them going into an aggregated fund. I don't know how many millions each of these sites individually would contribute to that, but I would encourage that to be explored as fully as it could be.
My question relates to the cycleways. There are a number of references made in the document to combined foot and cycle ways. I wonder if the staff could just show us on the chart exactly where those combined ways would be, particularly along the main road, and what provision there would be not only for pedestrians but also for cycle crossings on that route. I mean, I'm very mindful here of the fact that we are very close to a school, and the likely users of a cycleway wouldn't only simply be well-educated and experienced adults, but perhaps also children.
Through the chairman, thank you. I've got put up on the screen for you it's not the official definitive rights of way map, but it's an indication of the rights of way in the vicinity of the site and surrounding the site. The contribution that has been sought within the report currently deals with enhancements to the firstly to what we've termed the kind of Gunfield to West White cycle track, or otherwise known as the Gunfield Greenway, depending on how you've looked at that. That effectively would come through. There you can see where the kind of the rights of way are here, and that would effectively link all the way through. So that's kind of at this point coming. I'm looking to Mr. Chair just to confirm, is that the exit point? Slightly north of that. So effectively, it comes along the boundary of what is the current development being undertaken in that section of Avington on the road. So that's where where we refer to the Gunfield to West White cycle track. So that is part of that. It also it's set out within paragraph 5.5 of the officer's report for members who have the agenda in front of you. And also it refers to the N54, which runs along here, which runs along the boundary of the school. And so what we're looking at is enhancements to that to make that a cycle track, or I should say a 3-metre shared surface, which would provide those improvements. Again, it's covered in paragraph 6.48 of the report. And if I read that section out, if that would help, to assist mitigate the impact, significant sustainable transport contribution of £45,000 has been negotiated, which was contribute towards the Gunfield West White cycle track, together with the potential for either a 3-metre wide multi-use path along the northern boundary of Carisbrooke College playing fields to connect to the existing public right-of-way to the east, and a new shared use path forming part of the proposed development to the west, or the surfacing of the existing right-of-way N54, which is the point of the cursor. And then it says officers consider these enhancements would encourage the use of alternative means of transport for shorter journeys, having potential to reduce pressure on the highway network. That's that full paragraph. So they are the networks in the vicinity of that site.
Sorry, I meant specifically about Gunville Road. Along Gunville Road, what improvements would there be for cycling provision along Gunville Road and for the residents who were in Gunville and their children to come safely along Gunville Road on cycles?
Through the chairman, for 2 points of clarification on that matter. Firstly, there are no current proposals for enhanced cycle provision on Gunville Road itself. The other point to note is that an application must mitigate its impacts. And so although it is mitigate for the impacts it has in relation to potential highway safety, if there's a current issue in relation to kind of highway safety or the movement of kind of pedestrians or cyclists on Gunville Road, the development shouldn't mitigate that necessarily if it doesn't significantly exacerbate it. I think the point on that is that Island Roads haven't raised concerns with regards to the safety of the current network on Gunville Road for cyclists and pedestrians. Yes, there is a need to cross the road at points, but there are crossing points to allow that to be done safely. So the application is not considered necessary as part of the application to mitigate for anything in relation to that part of the network, but to provide enhancements for off-road links. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Oliver.
Yeah, to be honest, it's a follow-on question to that scenario. Is there any access from this site, without crossing Gunfield Road? I'm thinking we've got 110 houses, going in there, which is going to have families. Most of those are going to go to the school up Wellington Road and along there. So they're going to have to cross Gunfield Road, go down the other side, and then cross back over Gunfield Road. So is there going to be a walkway or some way through from the site to meet up with the estate there, or are we allowed to look at a three-way traffic light system at the end of Home Bargains? So we've got a crossing there, like you say. The objector said they actually go up to the next crossing, which is where the supermarket is. Children are children. They're not going to go up to the next crossing and walk back down again.
Thanks, Chairman. It may be a point where it is appropriate to bring Mr. Gard in, but I think what I want to reiterate to members once again is that a development needs to provide for mitigation for its own impacts based on the number of units. There isn't identified an issue with the safety of Gunfield Road at present. The application is for a relatively small number of units in terms of starting to discuss traffic lights and that element on Gunfield Road by Home Bargains. That's quite a substantial an element of work in relation to the nature of the development. So I would I'd be very cautious in terms of the approach of the amount that we're talking about. I have read out section of the officer report which deals with the proposed links that are shown, which include one along the boundary with the Carisbrooke College playing field. So there are the potential for enhancements to increase that route, but the existing route is not considered to be unsafe.
Thank you. I just want to bring in that I really get the feeling of members' issues about for instance, the financial contribution to the roads and the crossings. So I'm just going to bring in Mr. Bolter in that regard, because we just had a little discussion about it.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can just first expand Ms. Wilkinson's response to Councillor Oliver, and it's just to highlight that whilst not necessarily directly relevant to your deliberations this evening, councillors, and I appreciate this, you may wish to be aware that, and as indeed has been referred to earlier in relation to this item, that there is land adjacent to this site that is proposed to be allocated through the island planning strategy, which actually also connects through to land owned by the Isle of Wight Council at parts of the former Carisbrooke High School site. So there is a mechanism to bring forward through the plan-led process greater linkages on this basis, which I would anticipate would link very neatly with the emerging work that will be associated with the local transport plan. However, that information isn't here in front of us this evening, and I think what I've certainly been hearing is a number of issues that unfortunately, and it's a reasonably rare occasion that your officers haven't been able to provide you with the answers that you need in order to make a decision. So what I think we've got in this instance, it would be a suggestion from your officers that actually in this instance a deferral would be an appropriate way forward, and this is really given the fact that we don't have sufficient information in front of you this evening to determine essentially whether a requirement for the development to contribute to the costs of opening Taylor Road and which specific type of crossing would be considered appropriate by councillors. And we need to understand what the answers to those would be to then be able to advise you on whether seeking those things would then meet the relevant tests, because we need to understand whether the requirement that we've just spoken about actually mitigates the impacts that have been identified. So I think that's where we're at from an officer perspective. But if I may, Chairman, what I would just like to do is just highlight that as it stands, those are the two things that we would be going away to investigate further and seek to bring back further information to you for the next committee meeting. And I think this is a point that Ms Wilkinson made earlier, that if those are the only two things, we won't then be able to look at further things next time we meet. We will be looking at those two aspects. So, Chair, if I may, what I would ask of your committee is to make us aware if there is anything else that councillors feel that we need to have further information on, so we can go away and bring that to you. Thank you.
Is there anything, Councillor Quirk and Councillor Jarman?
I was going to move that we defer on the grounds just advised.
Yes, Chair. I'd like to add a third thing, which is that they do go away and investigate the issue. I know it's they only have to mitigate against causation from the site, but the causation, if that were to include removal of the pedestrian safety area and replacement with something else, that may have an implication, a secondary implication on the road safety. And I think there is an opportunity here for them to go away and investigate cycling provision along the Gunfield Road and safe crossing points associated with that. So I would add a third point, which is provision of safe cycling. Thank you.
Can we include that?
Are you going to come on that?
Include that, Sarah?
Thank you, John. I believe so. I think from our perspective, I think what we're looking at is the 2 points that have been discussed in terms of deferral relate to the safety of pedestrians in the removal of the pinch point and the appropriacy of enhancing pedestrian safety on Gunfield Road. So I think we would seek clarification that from our perspective, a control crossing would be an improvement to pedestrian safety in Gunfield Road. So it would effectively meet that requirement.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, yeah, just to reiterate, don't want to speak on behalf of the whole committee, but I would think there'll be some members that will agree with what I'm going to say, is that what we consider to be I'm misinterpreting what a controlled crossing is, but a controlled crossing, as in a pedestrian crossing or the like, at that point would be more appropriate. The raised table element is that there's two reasons for that. A raised table is easy to cycle over. It's easy for disabled pedestrians to use. It's also very much a traffic calming zone in itself, because it's essentially a long sleeping policeman. Councillor Brody's got them in his ward and he knows that they're quite effective, aren't they? I think the other reason that we think that's very important is because it is a very problematic part of Gunfield Road. I appreciate the data you've got maybe doesn't say that it's a dangerous road, but anyone that's got children that go to school in that vicinity know how many children cross that road. It is a really, really busy road. And the reason I think we're asking for something at this stage is because children exiting that site, if it was built soon, before any other connectivity, which would be great, to elsewhere, and I'm sure that will be forthcoming with other developments that we may have to look at.
I'm just very conscious of time.
Okay.
Right, if we want to get this deferral through.
I think crossing the road to get to school will be absolutely a necessity, because there is no pavement that side of the road, as Councillor Jarman said. So I think that's why it's so important. Okay.
I think it's important. Councillor Brady, I'm just conscious of time. We've got
just a quick point. Jan made a point earlier. Having a zebra crossing there or a pelican crossing, it's really the position of the crossing. If you've got roads turning right or left, it's hard to turn right or left if cars backed up to the lights or backed up to the crossing. You know, in a ward where I've got a zebra crossing next to a bus stop, you turn right or left into it. It's an absolute nightmare if you're trying to get out, because cars stop at a zebra crossing. You can't turn out of your own properties. So I think the type of crossing isn't the issue to me, because you've got good visibility there much better than I've got in my ward. It's the positioning of their crossing to enable people to turn right and left out of their properties and right left out of side roads. So as well as looking at the type of crossing, we've really got to look again at where these crossings are.
Thank you. Councillor Critchison, and then I'm going to move to the vote.
Thank you. Yeah, just quickly, on that when we're looking at the road safety elements and how we can improve that whether included in that a speed reduction could be used in that area as well as part of that. We want to look at all the different options that could make that a much safer area for children, bearing in mind the issues that have been and why that crossing was put there that is there right now, because I don't want to be responsible for it not being as safe as possible. Thank you.
I think that's noted. I've been within that, and I think the whole issue of the health and the safety and the traffic safety has been taken on board. We've got a proposal from Councillor Quirk, seconded by Councillor Brodie, for deferral on the points that have been made. Can I have a show of hands for those?
Clarification on what we're voting on.
Well, you need to have that.
Councillor Brodie, if they're going to include that, you have to do that. Yeah.
That's a
Yes, but I'm not quite sure what the actual final bit was. So in principle, I'm not opposed to it. But the two bits were very clear. Our two bits were very clear. I'm not quite so clear about the third element. It seems sort of looking at cycling.
Chair, I'd like to
can we just get clarification? Sorry, Councillor Brodie. Yes, Councillor Brodie.
It's a point of order. I'm actually quite concerned that we're being railroaded into a deferral when other members might have issues. I haven't, but other people might have issues that they want to raise. And that's because everybody's had enough. It's 4 hours and only 2. I remember planning committees would have 4 or 5 applications and they'd finish at 7 o'clock. It's becoming ridiculous how long I'm feeling quite unwell. I'm epileptic. I need to go home and take my medication and something to eat. And if the council's going to start doing that, they're going to start discriminating against me and other councillors. I mean, I know Councillor Fuller, if he doesn't mind, he's diabetic. I mean, he's probably desperate to get home by now. We've got to start tightening these meetings up. Thank you, Chair.
Name vote.
Councillor Adams, Councillor Beston, Councillor Brodie, Councillor Critchison, Councillor Downer, Councillor Drew, Councillor Jarman, Councillor Oliver, Councillor Price, Councillor Quirk and Councillor Lilly.
Those against?
Councillor Brading.
It's, the item is deferred. Item 5, any members' questions? No, I haven't received any writing. Sorry. Sorry.